Hello, welcome to our 12th lesson in Judaism Beliefs and Teachings. This lesson is all about the afterlife and resurrection. Our objectives today are to know and to understand key Jewish teaching all about the afterlife and resurrection, and to understand the significance of the ambiguity on the teaching that exists in Judaism on these topics. What you need to know today, you need to know that there is contrasting Jewish teaching about life after death. However, most Jews do believe in some form of world to come. And in that world to come, God is going to reward or punish people according to how they have lived their lives. To speculate means to have a really good guess about something you can't know for sure. A few years back, a new Batman film was coming out, and they released this image of Batman by the Batmobile. And this caused a lot of speculation. People were looking at Batman's outfit, Batman's stance, the darkness of the image, and they began to wonder what the film would be like, what Batman would be like in the film, what the plot would be like. There was huge speculation about something that couldn't be known. This is maybe a weird way of getting into it, but a really important concept to get behind when we're looking at the topic of life after death. It is something that ultimately can't be known. And we're going to see through the Jewish teaching that there's a lot of overlap and some ideas that seem to contradict others, as Jews have speculated for centuries as to what the next life looks like, what happens after death. First things first, most Jews would say there is an afterlife. I've got a quote here, I won't read it to you, from Rabbi Benjamin Bleck, and he points out here, we're made in the image of God. And if we're made in the image of God, then there's eternity in us. We must be everlasting creatures. If we've got part of God in us and God is eternal, then we must also be eternal in some way. So most Jews would say there is an afterlife, and that is a key Jewish belief in itself. Here's a great story written by a rabbi. I'm going to read this to you now. This is going to help you understand a little bit about Jewish teaching. A very wealthy man, not known for his piety. Piety means charitable giving, kindness to others, etc. A very wealthy man, not known for his piety, stood in a long line of those waiting to have their lives assessed by the heavenly court. Someone waiting to have their life judged, potentially by God, to see what sort of afterlife they get. He listened attentively to those who were being judged before him, recounting both of their spiritual failings and achievements. A number of them seemed to have the scales weighted against them until they suddenly remembered acts of charity they had performed, which dramatically tipped the scales in their favor. The rich man took it all in and smiled to himself. When it was his turn, he confidently said, I may have committed many sins during my lifetime, but I realize now what has the power to override them. I'm a very wealthy man, and I will be happy to write out a very large check to whatever charity you recommend. To which the court replied, we are truly sorry, but here we do not accept checks, only receipts. Now, this is a great story to get you thinking about the afterlife. In this story, a man has gone up, he's lived his life, and he's about to be judged. And he hopes that at the last minute, he can do something to change the scales for him. He's committed many sins. He thinks, well, maybe now I can, undo those bad deeds I did. However, it was too late. The way that you live in life affects your afterlife. And according to this story, when you get to that point of judgment, there's going to be little you can do in order to tip the scales and change how you've lived your life. Right, so 4 really key ideas we need to have a handle of for this part of Judaism teaching. Olam Haba, Sheol, Gan Eden, and Gehinnom. Now, these might be new words to you, but we're going to explore them now. And I've got to be honest with you, team, this is a complex topic, and there is ambiguity, there is contradiction in some of these ideas, and how they work together is a little confusing. I thought it'd be helpful to look and think about them like jigsaw puzzle pieces and working out exactly how these ideas can work together. So firstly, Olam Haba. This literally means the life to come. There's a life now and there's a life to come. And most Jews would say that's one of our key beliefs about the afterlife, is that there is a life to come that's going to be different to this life. Another key Jewish idea is the idea of Sheol, the underworld, the place of the dead. We have another translation for it is Hades. It's a place where the dead go after life. And again, there's lots of discussion about what exactly Sheol is, what happens there. Do all souls go there? Is it just those who've lived a bad life? Once you're in there, can you get back up again, potentially? Another key Jewish idea when it comes to the afterlife is Gan Eden. And you'll notice that that sounds a lot like Garden of Eden. And it's the idea of another perfect place with God. But again, and you'll notice a pattern here, there's lots of discussions about what exactly it is and when it will be available. Will it come in when the Messiah arrives and it will be part of the Messianic Age, or potentially it will be after the Messianic Age? But I'm sure you can see the pattern here. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of speculation about what the afterlife is going to be like. The fourth piece of the puzzle here is Gehinnom, or Gehenna, which is another word for a word you'll be more familiar with is a hell-like place. Now Gehenna was a literal valley outside Jerusalem. It is a literal place, but it was a word used to talk about where rubbish was burnt up. So this is a fourth idea to bring into this complicated arena of Jewish beliefs of life after death. So let's pause here, have a go at these. When you're ready, unpause it and we'll look at the answers. Okay, let's check your understanding. So Olam Haba, just a one sentence definition, your own words really, but something like the world to come. You might recognize Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Olam Haba, the world to come. So Olam is the world. Sheol, the place of the dead or the underworld. Hades. Gan Eden, a place of perfection with God, similar to Garden of Eden. And Gehinnom or Gehenna, a hell-like place where evil is punished potentially. Number two, do you think it's good to spend time speculating what happens after death? Well, what do you think about that? You might say, no, you should focus on this life now and just concentrate on the people around you, the opportunities you've got. Don't worry about worrying about what's to come. Others would say, well, it is important to speculate about life after death because if we all end up there in some capacity, we probably want to think about what we'd like it to be like and how do we make it to the place we want to be. Number three, what does being made in the image of God have to do with the afterlife? Well, some rabbis have said that because we're made in the image of God, therefore we are eternal like God is eternal. And so after this life, there must be more. And hopefully you had an opportunity there to do that extension and read that fantastic article. So there are let's start with these anyway, our 4 bits of teaching on the afterlife. And there's real discussion and controversy surrounding exactly how these could work together. Some Jews have said that they don't work together. You can see a quote there from myjewishlearning.com. Though some Jewish scholars have tried to clarify these ideas, it would be impossible to reconcile all the Jewish texts and sources that discuss the afterlife. So some say that they don't actually work together. And some would say actually they know that it does work together. We just have to think about it more, discuss it more, and we'll work out how it all fits together. Previously in our lesson on the Messiah, we looked at the idea of the Messianic Age, the time when the Messiah arrives and brings in this new age. And part of the teaching of that is that the dead will be resurrected. So resurrection is a really key belief for many Jews. But how this fits into the pieces of the puzzle we've got already is up for discussion. But there's another key idea there is resurrection, and it's a key belief we link to the Messianic Age. Another piece of the puzzle is the idea of reincarnation. Some Jews believe in reincarnation, some don't. It comes from a Kabbalistic understanding of the scriptures. But the idea would be you've got 613 mitzvot, and if you haven't managed to achieve following them in your life, you might die and then be reincarnated and get to have another go until you've achieved and observed all 613 mitzvot. So, it's complicated, isn't it? Let's look at our puzzle now. So when it comes to Jewish teaching on life after death, you can see that it's not really clear cut. We've got 6 ideas here, all of which have different ideas of understanding each part, deliberation about each aspect, and then as well, how do they all fit together? Now, this is actually quite important in itself, the ambiguity of the teaching. It's great because what it does is it encourages discussion about what the life after death will be, but also whether or not we should spend time speculating on it. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks has taught that obsession with death ultimately devalues life, and that we shouldn't spend a lot of time speculating and worrying about Olam Haba, about the life to come. And in fact, we should focus on this life now, on the relationships we have with others at this point in time, in the context we find ourselves in, and investing our time and energy there, not in worrying about something we can never truly know. In teaching on Deuteronomy chapter 30 verses 12 and 13, to find God you don't have to climb to heaven or cross the sea. He points out that God is here, and God is now, and God is life. God is not death. God is here, God is now, God is life. And we should spend our time and energy on this time, not worrying about the next. So let's check our understanding. Pause it there, have a go at these. You'll see that question 6 is a 12-mark question, one of our GCSE style 12-mark questions. Have a go at that. When you're ready, unpause it and we'll look at the answers. Right, let's check your understanding. So quick definitions. Number 4, for a resurrection. Resurrection is the belief that the Jews will be raised to life again when the Messiah arrives. Reincarnation is the belief that once someone has died, they are reborn and have another opportunity to live a good life, for Jews following the 613 Mitzvot. Number 5, Jewish teaching on the afterlife is clear. So 3 reasons to agree and 3 reasons to disagree. Quite a tough question. If you're going to focus on the agree side to start with, we could say that there is Olam Haba, there is a life to come. You could say that it's clear that we will be rewarded or punished depending on how we live our life. You might talk about Sheol, the place of the dead, where souls go after this life. To have 3 reasons to disagree, you might talk about the ambiguity, about how some things have been interpreted so many different ways. You might talk about the huge discussion that goes on today with regard to trying to understand and explain it, because it is complicated. And you might talk about it like the pieces of the puzzle, how many Jews would say they don't really go together. And so you have to work out what's important and what's not. Number 6 is our 12-marker style question. Jews should focus on this life, not the afterlife. So similar to one we looked at earlier, you might talk about what Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says about how by focusing on death, we devalue life, and how we should focus on our context, on the here and now. We should focus on following the mitzvot. We should focus on following the key moral principles. Others would say, no, we do need to have some thought for the afterlife, because ultimately that's where we're going to end up after we've lived this life. So we want to think about where do we want to be and how are we going to get there. And then a couple of extensions. There's some really good articles to read on this. I'm by no means an expert on any of this, and I would recommend, if you want some deeper, better teaching, go away and do read these yourself. That brings us to the end of the lesson. Let's just finally revisit our need to know. So you need to know there is contrasting Jewish teaching about life after death. However, most believers do believe in some sort of world to come, where God will reward and punish people according to how they lived. See you next time.